Hi, everybody. Today, I want to talk about the work that we are doing in disrupting drug discovery and development using AI with Innoplexus. It all starts with a purpose. All great things start with a purpose, and purpose has to be at the core. And so it happened in Germany when I worked in consulting before. My first mentor became also my best friend. He was my first boss. And as here, I didn't know a lot of people. Almost every weekend, every second weekend, I used to visit him and his family. And we were extremely close and did a lot of fantastic projects for big pharmas, for biotechs, etc. One evening, in a very uneventful life, coming in originally from India, when I went to the tech school, IIT Bombay, and then coming to Germany, studying and working for consulting. That evening, when he told me that he was diagnosed with cancer, changed everything. And I can still share with you, and I can still feel that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness when you stand in a hospital room from where I worked, seeing the family, and all of those faces had a sort of hopelessness on them. And there were unanswered questions. What are the alternative therapies that are possible? Where are different clinical studies taking place where he could participate? And third, who are the real experts who could actually provide a qualified second opinion to him for his specific kind of disease? Of course, you have tumor boards, but then everybody in that tumor board cannot have all the knowledge of different kinds of, at that time, breast cancer, for instance, was considered to be one disease. Today, it's over 40 different subtypes. And we look at disease variability, it's just too many different things. So I went to some of my mentors and friends who are industry leaders and told them, how come it be that there are so many unanswered questions? And one of them, he said, medicine is like religion in the 18th century. Only the priests, the bishops, they could speak the language of the gods. The normal people couldn't. There was no education. They didn't speak Latin in Europe, for instance, or Sanskrit in India. And it's the same today in medicine. There is enormous information asymmetry between patients and physicians, investors and biotech companies. And they said, not just these three unanswered questions that you have brought in, the industry is full of many questions because it's all about data that's rapidly exploding. Some studies claim that the doubling rate of medical knowledge is 70 days. So there is an explosion in terms of the volumes, more than 32 times in a year. But on top of that, the degree of specificity and the order of complexity of all of this data is also immense. Coming in from India, your first instinct is to throw people at problems because we have so many of them. But given such doubling of data, the doubling rate, it would just have been impossible to manually annotate all of this data and structure it. Because if you want to do analysis, if you want to apply AI, you need to structure the data and bring it together in a context. So we looked at what was out there in 2015, and there were two schools of thought, two approaches that people were using. One, I would say, one could call the IBM Watson approach, which says combine natural language programming with brute force computational power on available life science data, and you can basically predict anything. The challenge with this approach was and is it does not understand the context of life science. EGFR could be a protein, could be a target, could be a gene, could be the filtration rate of human kidneys. It could be different things in different contexts. And a machine should have the ability to semantically and contextually interpret in what context are we looking at a specific context, at a specific concept. And of course, in this approach, companies also tried out building research graphs, buying all the data from a specific university hospital, taking some real world data or getting some external published data from some of the data aggregators and build a graph, a research graph that would provide or should provide that context. But the challenge there is, like any language, the language of life science, the language of drug discovery and development also has to be dynamic. With such a rapid explosion of data, you need to create a model that in real time could update this context and keep this language alive. There was a second school of thought, with some of the companies in this space, such as Accenture, Atomwise, Benevolent AI, they use, and it is a very pragmatic approach. They say, well, we can't solve all the problems. Let's focus ourselves on one part of the problem or one specific problem. It's a very problem-focused approach. And there you would look at small molecules, you would look at AML, you would look at Parkinson's, buy all the data, try to create a graph, and try to understand a hidden interrelationship that others, scientists have probably not looked at, and try to find a silver bullet therapy using that approach. There are two challenges with this approach. Challenge number one, human biology is a complex system. You can't just silo upstream targets together or silo the human brain and say, because it's a neurological disease, we'll just look at targets that are directly associated with the brain, with the specific disease, and not look at everything else. Everything is connected. And hence it mandates a universal approach, a universal graph. Optimizing silos won't promise you an optimal solution. And the second challenge with this approach is most of these approaches focus on biology and biology alone, even though majority of projects fail, not because the biology is not good, but because in clinical development, you are not able to recruit patients in the right time. You don't have the right investigators. You don't design the trials well. Or when you come out in the market, you are second or third in line. Somebody else has already got a huge patient uptake. And even though you are marginally better, you just can't get that market share. So most of the value is created and destroyed in the industry in the clinical and commercial stages of the value chain, phases of the value chain, and not in pre-discovery or discovery. And all these approaches seem to focus yet on discovery. So we said we need to create an AI that is truly at scale and is able to understand the context, the language of life science. Only then we would be able to build a virtual drug discovery and development platform. And that's exactly what we did. We looked at two problems. One was the published universe. So we leverage AI to scan the top level domains and predict which URLs could be a hospital. We track over 50,000 hospitals worldwide, over 20 million researchers, investigators, thousands of scientific congresses, and crawl up to 10 billion web pages a day and then train our CV on drug advisory committee reports, poster presentations, so data specific to the industry, with a high precision, extracting from unstructured PDFs, images, HTML pages, structured information, and push this information in what is today the largest research graph in the industry with over 30 million entities. And of course, trillions of semantic associations. So even though this data is publicly available, it's all dispersed everywhere. A data related to one specific clinical trial could be found in 2 or 3 clinical registries, 10, 15, 20, 30 primary and additionally secondary publications, scientific congress presentations, and at US FDA, EMA, or other regulatory bodies, and the reports that could be found out there. The ability to increase resolution around these entities is what really moves the cheese. And in terms of quality assurance, which is extremely important, you have to look at the reputation of the source, but also apply various statistical measures to ensure that the signal that comes in from these public sources is really credible and is correct, given very low reproducibility in the life science data. So with this, we are able to, in real time, structure the published universe in life science and bring it all together in a context. So if you would say Google is a horizontal extraction architecture, what we have built here is a vertical extraction architecture focusing on drug discovery and development. Of course, there is a second problem, and that problem is proprietary data. You still need proprietary data to train some models. There would always be some underrepresentedness, given you can't find all the relevant data to train your models in the public domain. So here, what's the extant wisdom? It's a spray and pray approach, wherein people tend to create data pools. But if you need a pancreatic cancer model, you need data on pancreatic cancer cell lines, you don't need cough and cold data. You don't have specificity there. And that's where we bring in blockchain, which we believe together with AI has truly the potential to transform this industry and bring it in a completely new paradigm. We create a telephone directory of the metadata, experimental protocols, assays, data from biobanks, large publishers on a public blockchain. If you publish there, you preserve your prior art claim, your IP is protected. And as we render it searchable in the same graph, if I find that data to be useful, I could either license the data or the gradients therein against a token or a thank you note. With this, I am able to create a scalable, democratic, equitable AI at scale platform wherein all data contributors, all citizens that own data, scientists that own their IP, get an incentive, and all these data transactions are also immutably timestamped and recorded in a public blockchain. That's how we create this platform wherein all the data from published and unpublished universe can be structured and brought together in a context. It's on this data that we leverage various AI approaches, again, to answer the most pressing questions for the industry. Identifying targets, designing new molecules. We are doing a program for COVID-19 with the support of the German government, predicting biomarkers and predicting which studies would actually work and which won't work and why. Here, it's important, as I mentioned, to address the challenges. The way we work, we believe, the future of AI would be those of platforms. We need AI at scale platforms wherein all of this data would be structured, that you could apply AI models to make predictions with high precision and recall values, wherein the data that's fed in is also relevant. Explainability is extremely important. You can't have a black box predicting biomarkers, not being able to explain why certain biomarkers seem to be more plausible, have a higher probability of success. Prognostic biomarkers, for instance, or targets. If you want to identify, discover targets that would be relevant for, say, Alzheimer's, and you want to develop a multi-specific antibody that would address those targets, you should be able to provide evidence. Why is the machine suggesting specific targets have a higher probability of success and others not? And there should be some sort of risk sharing possible in collaborating with various stakeholders in the industry. And that's what we try to work. Our model is based on business model on building a portfolio of partnerships, wherein we work with a number of biotechs and pharma companies, wherein, for instance, a biotech company would develop an antibody for Alzheimer's or antimicrobial resistance. We would tell them for what targets they should engineer that antibody for, and we would get a participation right in that antibody. And we have 10 programs currently where we have participation rights. By the end of this year, we should have 15. And by the end of next year, we believe we'll have 50 participation rights in various drug assets. If you think of it, even if law of averages were to prevail, we believe our precision is substantially higher. It's kind of a virtual pharma. You have various participations in various drug assets that you get in lieu of the insights that you provide. The other business, of course, is the platform business, wherein CROs, pharmaceutical companies build dashboards for decision support on our platform. We are launching a life science cloud soon. We also launched a patient app called Curia. It's for cancer patients, and it does two things. One, it answers questions related to what are the alternative therapies? Where are the right clinical trials for me? And who are the real experts for my specific kind of disease? Again, if you look at hospital websites, all oncologists are oncologists. You can't make out which oncologist is an expert on ALK mutated NSCLC patients, who has done research there, who has involved in writing guidelines and so on, and we make it transparent. In Germany, we had a resounding success already. We had 2 cancer patients who were enrolled in trials because of our app. The other thing this app does is, unlike patients like me or other patient forums, wherein you have to stand on a stage and tell, I have this disease, and other patients would come and say, we had a similar experience and exchange notes. Many cultures in Europe and Asia do not subscribe to that kind of, of modus operandi. So here, the patient app recommends you a cancer twin, looking at the disease characteristics of various patients on the app close by, but the degree of anonymity and the communication is completely controlled by the patient himself using a private key. All of this happens on an EOS blockchain. And the third is super interesting. If you would look at the daily abnormal returns, the highest daily abnormal returns of all listed companies in NYSE NASDAQ for the past 5 years, half of the highest daily abnormal returns come from listed life science companies. And almost 40% of those highest volatility life science stocks, that volatility could be explained by one single event, and that's the clinical trial readout. So if you could predict the readout correctly in advance, you could do better stock picking. And that's what we did for the past 2 years, been working with a fund that would invest based on our clinical trial prediction engine, and our portfolio has returns in the excess of 80%. And now we are looking at enlarging and having a partnership at a completely different scale. So here you see this AI at scale platform once you bring the data in a structured format, in a context, you can apply AI to add value to various stakeholders. The future of this industry, as I said, is that next generation biotechs won't be founded in a building having some scientists and some data scientists. I believe next generation biotechs, biopharmas, and pharmas would be built on digital platforms. And we believe Innoplexus would be a leading digital platform to get this done. We are a German company with over 300 colleagues. We have 2 offices in US and one office in India. And we believe that, till every patient that sees that hopelessness in front of their eyes, the family members, when they don't have ready-made answers, when they don't have transparency, our job is not done. So we'll continue to work hard day and night to transform this industry to a new paradigm for better patient outcomes, that we are able to serve the entire humanity. Thank you.